This video is meant to teach you about a reactive oxygen species, or ROS, called a radical superoxide anion, and how it affects plants. Scientists write it as O(2) sign asterisk to make things easier, so that's how we will write it in this video. Atoms are the basic unit of life. They are surrounded by electrons that work in pairs to keep an atom stable and allow it to bind to other atoms. However, sometimes it doesn't always work that way. Especially in oxygen, sometimes electrons are left unpaired, or only one of a pair is present. Electrons that are left unpaired are lonely and desperately want another electron to bond with, so they will react as quickly as they can with the closest molecule that has another lonely electron. If the lonely electron can't find a partner, the oxygen molecule will become a reactive oxygen species, or ROS. The radical superoxide anion is different from a normal oxygen because it has an extra electron in its valence shell. This gives superoxide 13 electrons instead of molecular oxygen's 12. This extra electron gives the molecule a negative charge, which is why we call it an anion, and it makes it significantly more reactive than regular molecular oxygen. Superoxide is formed when oxygen prematurely accepts an electron from an electron transport chain. The electron transport chain is a process in respiration and photosynthesis when a plant is converting sugars to energy. In this process, protons, which carry electrons, move quickly across the membrane of the mitochondrion, creating a proton motive force. This force pushes the movement of ATP synthase, a protein that produces energy in the form of ATP, in order to move and create energy for the plant. Normally, in these reactions, oxygen acts as the last electron transporter. It usually serves as an acceptor, as when the electrons are done moving across the membrane, it can attach to the oxygen, creating water. However, it can occasionally find its way into earlier steps in the chain, and, as the most electronegative atom, can take electrons out. This not only forms the toxic superoxide, but it also disrupts the flow of electrons in that reaction pathway. Two major pathways that contribute to electron leakage through superoxide formation are the processes of photosynthesis in the chloroplast and photorespiration in the mitochondria.
The main takeaway is this: the radical superoxide anion is a reactive oxygen species that can disrupt two cellular pathways that are critical for the survival of plants: photosynthesis and photorespiration. This is all because the superoxide has an unpaired electron, unlike regular molecular oxygen. Before we go any further, let's define an important term. Herbicide, a chemical substance that kills plants, commonly called weed killer. Many herbicides kill plants by causing the formation of reactive oxygen species. For example, an herbicide called paraquat causes the formation of the radical superoxide anion in plant cells, which causes the death of the plant. At this point, we know that the radical superoxide anion messes up photosynthesis and photorespiration. However, reactive oxygen species are both good and bad. Some of them help with different parts of our immune system, like forming the white blood cells that attack bacteria in our bodies. In fact, superoxides are used in order to attack foreign bodies during an infection. However, superoxides are also very toxic, so the body has to produce an enzyme to break it down. This enzyme is called superoxide dismutase. Superoxides are also produced during radiation exposure, and in certain cases can cause bacteria to be more dangerous than without it. In plants, ROS can cause the membranes, which coat the outside of the cell, to degenerate. This kills the cell, releasing its organelles, and, as more cells die, slowly killing the plant.
Plant cellular membranes are critical to the survival of the cell, and on a larger scale, the entire plant. Cellular membranes are composed of proteins and lipids. They help regulate cell growth, provide structure, and protect the cell from harmful compounds. Most cellular membranes in plants are semi-permeable phospholipid bilayers. Semi-permeable is a fancy way of saying that the membrane is like a filter. Only certain compounds are allowed through, while unwanted compounds are kept out. Phospholipid bilayer refers to the structure of the membrane. It is composed of 2 layers, hence the term bilayer, of phospholipids. The outside of the membrane is composed of phospholipid polar heads, and the inside of the membrane is composed of fatty acid tails. Paraquat is an herbicide that many farmers use to rid their fields of weeds. It is such an effective herbicide because paraquat disrupts the photosynthetic reactions that occur in the thylakoid membrane. This interruption causes an accumulation of energy in the form of electrons, which leads to the formation of reactive oxygen species like radical superoxide. This is where our discussion of membranes becomes very important. Radical superoxide targets the fatty acids that form the inner portion of the membranes, and this damage causes the membrane to rupture. Once the membrane ruptures, it can no longer act as a barrier to keep unwanted compounds out of the organelles, or the cell in general. As the chain reaction started by the radical superoxide continues, it causes the mitochondria to increase production of the radical superoxide. This creates a snowball effect, where the presence of the superoxide leads to lots more of the superoxide being created, and so forth. As plant cells die and photosynthesis halts, the plant begins to wilt. In high light conditions, we can observe the plant become yellow and dry just a few hours after contact with paraquat. In the case of a farmer trying to get rid of harmful weeds, this long series of chemical reactions is hugely important. So what have we learned? We've discussed the superoxide anion, where it comes from, and how it affects different organisms, specifically plants. We learned that reactive oxygen species, or ROSs, are a form of oxygen with a lonely electron that makes them very unstable. We specifically focused on one type of ROS, the radical superoxide anion. This species of oxygen forms when oxygen reacts too early in the photosynthetic electron transport chain. The superoxide can cause important cellular membranes to rupture, ultimately killing the plant. So here's a takeaway question. How does such a small particle, like the radical superoxide anion, in plant cells affect us? The superoxide can cause changes in plants that we can see, like yellow leaves and desiccation. This can occur naturally, or it can be caused by human interventions, like spraying weeds with an herbicide to protect a garden. We can also experience the effects of the radical superoxide when we eat produce from farms that use certain weed killers. In conclusion, studying the reactions caused by this superoxide has allowed us to manipulate parts of our environment for our own benefit, even though our knowledge of reactive oxygen species in general is still limited.